Hello, everyone. It's really lovely to see you all. Thanks for being here. My name is Bonnie. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the poetry event coordinator here at Brookline Booksmith. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to host three incredible poets, Ayşe Guvenilir, Mariam Dogar, and Maisha Prome, as part of our Third Thursdays poetry series here at Brookline Booksmith. They'll be sharing their work from the anthology Our Ancestors Did Not Breathe This Air. I'm going to talk about the book a little bit in a minute. But before I do, I have just a few housekeeping notes. So firstly, copies of Our Ancestors Did Not Breathe This Air will be available for sale in that back corner over there. I really encourage you to support these poets' work in any way that you can. Also, please know that the event is being live streamed on that iPad over there. Hello, YouTube. Our audience shouldn't be visible to the live stream viewers other than the backs of a few heads, but if you don't want to be live on YouTube, just avoid walking in front of it and you'll probably be okay. Finally, we will have a Q&A at the end of the event, so hold your questions to the end, but definitely have them ready to go. This event, as I said before, is part of a monthly reading series taking place here at Brookline Booksmith. So if you love poetry and you want to check out the series, you can find our June lineup on the website if you are so inclined. And now for introductions. Mariam Dogar is a Pakistani-American poet who grew up in Dubai and Massachusetts and writes about homeland and identity. She's currently living in Brookline and training to be a physician at Harvard Medical School. Maisha Prome is pursuing her PhD in biomaterials at Yale University. She's moved back and forth between Bangladesh and the US throughout her life and loves all things creative, including baking, crocheting, and writing fiction. And Ayşe Guvenilir was born into a family with a Venezuelan mother, Turkish father, and three older brothers. She grew up in Texas, France, and New York. She's currently a researcher in the biomechatronics group at the MIT Media Lab and uses writing as a means of connection, reflection, and relaxation. All three of these poets are contributors to the collection Our Ancestors Did Not Breathe This Air, a beautifully rendered anthology of work that explores homeland, family, and identity. The 6 contributors to the collection met as undergraduates at MIT and connected with each other over their writing, sharing poems which had common threads of culture and belonging, of community, of love, of loss, of growing up. During the peak of the coronavirus pandemic, these 6 students connected through their poetry and collaborated on what would become the collection we are lucky enough to hear from today. Our Ancestors Did Not Breathe This Air brings fresh voices of poignancy and much-needed representation. From the sense of a bustling street market in India to the warmth of stories rooted in Venezuela to snippets of college days shared at MIT, the poetry in this book features an ache for grounds no longer walked upon. With a range of distinct styles and voices, the poet's nuanced self-expression amounts to a piece that is both prayer and rebellion. Their words, introspective and reminiscing, witty and thoughtful, are an ode to that which makes them who they are and where they are from. Simultaneously, their voices are a rejection of dangerous stigmas, cultural taboos, and oppressive systems. In both verse and full-color images, Our Ancestors Did Not Breathe This Air is a bold and unfiltered collection, recounting moments, tears, and dreams that have been generations in the making. I'm so thrilled to welcome you here to read from it. Everyone, please give a warm welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this very chilly May day. We are so excited to be here at Brookline Booksmith. As Bonnie mentioned, I actually live in Brookline now, and this is my favorite bookstore in the greater Boston area. So it's really nice to be here, and I think it's really special for the 3 of us because we all met at MIT over in Cambridge. And we don't have all 6 of our poets today, but anytime that a few of us can get together is really special. Bonnie gave a great intro into the book and kind of what it's about, but just to give you a little bit more before we start reading from the book. This was kind of just a labor of love. As you might have heard, none of us really do poetry full time and have kind of found our way to poetry through not being fully satisfied in STEM. And because of that, have really just found this book as a way for us to hang out as friends, as a way for us to come together and be creative and do some of the things that we love together. So tonight, if you want to laugh, if you want to cry, go for it, because that's kind of what we did for a year and a half while we were writing this book, every week meeting together and just getting in our feels and writing this book that touches upon a lot of things that were going on in our lives and in our families' lives at the time. So I just want to set that space up for y'all. And is there any other words that you guys want to mention before we get started? Okay, great. So the first poem that I'm reading is called Oud. In the drawer by my bed, I keep the scent you wore to Eid prayer. An unmarked bottle not intended for refills. Screwed so tightly I will never use it up. But twice a year I let myself drink it in. The scent of money and coins and sweat on henna-stained hands. The rush of half-second kisses and last-minute zakat. The crackling of knees mixed with loudspeaker takbirs. And of course, the sight of your smile, like the sugar syrup we poured on microwave gulab jamun. But was it heavy or light, crystal clear or blurred? I don't think I can tell the difference. I can't bring myself to eat them that way anymore. All I want is you to always be. I don't use the perfume you wore to Eid prayer. It's an unmarked world I can't refill. I bottle these memories to keep them potent, so that twice a year we say Eid Mubarak in the drawer by my bed. So this was a poem that I wrote about losing somebody. Some of the references in there, maybe not everybody gets, so I'll just do a quick explanation. Eid is kind of like the Muslim Christmas, and it was a big time for celebration for us. It happens twice a year, and this poem talks a little bit about missing someone during these moments of celebration and how sometimes that can kind of be the worst part of grief. My next poem that I'll be reading is called Tangerine. I swear they'll get happier. Lately, I've been starting to feel my soul instead of my body. Like that day on the beach with the rocks and the sunset. Footsteps so faint, I could almost levitate. With the horizon speaking into my ear, be content. But when I sat at the dinner table in the center of the forest, a citrus spread and the smell of durian between us, when he leaned forward and whispered that he could feel his ancestors in the air. Or when I pass a tiger lily and feel a touch on my arm, tracing the outline of the last day she could stand upright. When we walked in the garden and I painted her toes, a bright orange that decorated her feet on her deathbed. Or when my knees knock against a stranger's and I remember us in the back of a sedan with a broken AC, sharing secrets for hours in the delirious glow of the desert, giving me inconvertible proof that you did exist. See, I've come to the conclusion that I'm not quite literal. I am memories transcribed without my knowledge, like the passive rise and fall of my chest, or the tears that slip from my eyes when I laugh. In this brilliant orchestra, I collect these moments, undeniably alive and imperfect and sentient. I am congruent with the hearts I've met before, and those he bids me to meet again. So this poem, it's called Tangerine because I was thinking about a lot of different moments in my life that are extremely vivid. I always say I have a really bad memory, but for some reason, there are certain things that stick, and they're not the things you want to stick. But they all kind of had this color associated to it, and that's how that poem ended up with that title. And then the last of my poems that I'll read is called Period, a little on the nose, so I won't explain it too much. Just read it. You woke to a surprise on your bed, pure white sheets stained rusted red. They said it was normal, nothing to fear, but the sight of your blood kept feeding the tears. You cried for what you couldn't know but felt. You grieved the innocence that you'd once held. You lost a childhood of skirts and shorts. They now controlled your body parts. The next month, your roll turned crimson again. Coach said, wear tampons like the other woman. At home, you Googled what tampon means. Then you closed the laptop and quit swim team. Your accidents were public with family and strangers. You'll never forget their whispers and fingers. You prayed for the pain the others talked about, so that next time you could catch yourself before spilling out. 1 month, you're ambushed by 2 visits. You then leave the masjid entirely to avoid the critics. Sometimes your brother would throw a fit. He's mad when you aren't praying, but he is. It would be simple to explain to him why, but the thought makes you feel small. Instead, you hide. At school, you learn about the menstrual cycle. You hear them in the back. Periods make girls go psycho. As the days pass, they always have more to say about what you wear and how you pray, who you should touch and for how long, and where you should travel and why you're not strong. To you I say, woman is not a sin. You're a miracle sister. You've always been. You bleed and heal as you sprint through life. Your sole purpose, I promise, is not to be a good wife. You carry them in your belly and upon your tongue, heavy on your shoulders and deep inside your lungs. You are unscripted power, my dear, and we won't forget it. That's the last of my poems that I'll be reading.
Hi guys, it's lovely to be here with you all tonight. Before I read a couple of my poems, I just wanted to comment a little bit on Mariam's poems. In general, there's so many things I love about her work and the way that she writes. I feel like the way that she rhymes in the poem actually she just shared, it was very good, and I feel like, especially for the topic that she was talking about, periods, menstruation, I feel like it really highlighted like that time in your life when women get their periods. I also feel like just in general, her poems are really good at capturing emotion, and I feel like all of them were a good example of that. Oud especially, I feel that way. Like she talks about like the perfume being potent, and to me like the emotions are so potent in that poem. Thank you for sharing, Mariam. The first poem I will be sharing is a poem called When I Think Sunshine. When I think sunshine, flying barefoot, barely being able to catch a breath from all this laughing, chasing, the nights seeming to last forever until they ended, and it was a new day, and we were fasting. Sun blazing, we went outside anyways, playing until we could eat, and it would be never-ending night once again. Maybe this time there were no manhunts, but always some sort of game. Certainly a feeling of having to pee constant until it was over, and back home my feet were washed of the grass stains left behind and to cool the blazing of the sun. A new day so heavy it felt like we were the ocean. Swimming we were instead of running, and I never did get to jump into the pool with my shoes on. It was once, but the brain was burned into the memory of my 3-layered skin. Every day something new or old, riding bikes, dodging balls, shooting hoops, exploring forests, running like time did not exist. Summer was on fire, even if it was raining, and we were invincible until we were no longer, nor was it summer. And real life starts up, dreams of never-ending night when I think sunshine. This poem is about summer. I don't know if you guys could tell. But in particular, it's about summer, like that childhood, like summer you feel like, there's not really much problems when school starts, and like the days just seem to last forever. In particular, this poem, When I Think Sunshine, is called a haibum, which basically means it's a combination of a prose poem and it ends with a haiku. The next poem I'm going to read is called The Middle Between Us. It's about my abuela, my grandma, when she immigrated to the US some years ago. The middle between us. They left early, before the morning. Were boarded. and we don't hear from them again until the unreliable Wi-Fi lets them connect back to us. Waiting for the shuttle, waiting to go outside. Oh wait, we can't, it's not safe. Waiting for tomorrow in our parents' sleep. Except they wake every hour, waiting for this day, years in the making, the unfortunate reality that a death had to be the bridge to this waiting. On the other side, she smiles, scared of leaving, scared of never coming back. Estoy visitando, she'll say, but we all know that was never the plan. Scared of this day she knew was coming, but postponed for her own reasons after the bureaucracies finally stopped delaying passports and widows' pensions. Scared because this was her home, where her hijos no longer in this country were raised, where her first nieta, her mama, and most recently her esposo were buried. Scared, and she boards the plane. When they see her, arriving in a wheelchair, a little smaller than they remember, they smile. She smiles, and cross the ocean together. The only other thing I think I want to comment about on this poem, which we haven't really touched upon so far during this reading, is that there are drawings associated with the different poems in the book. Sometimes it's drawing, sometimes it's a picture. This one, in this case, it represents the ocean. Afeefah, one of the poets, did all the drawings, and they're very beautiful. 10 out of 10. The last poem I'm going to share from my poems is called Comb Through from Root to End. It's on page 118 if you guys want to follow along. Comb through from root to end. You look Hispanic with those hoops. You look so Turkish. You clearly got your satch from here too. But you have your mommy's rizos. The way they say you don't know the deal. The scrunch of their eyes. You hide behind your madre for words you could never have taught. Unable to detangle adorations your abuelos loved you with, you avoid going near the telefono when they're on. You take Dersler on Saturdays, conditioning kelime by kelime that you thereafter forget. You decide to choose the lengua over French that could brush you closer to Anlayish more than maybe a palabra here or there. Your hair goes from douce to rizado, and somehow that changes where you're from. You give up on trying to make it perfect, on trying to weave each strand seamlessly into the next. You can't braid layered hair without the fringes sticking out. At least I have never been able to. One thing I want to comment on about this poem, maybe just a little bit about my writing process. I would say in general, a lot of poems, the way I write them is like, I get like a burst of like a feeling. So like The Middle Between Us was definitely that. Like it was around that time that my grandma was gonna be immigrating, and this is just like what I was feeling as that whole process was going on. Versus like, for example, Comb Through from Root to End. In the structure of our book, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at it, but it's broken up by topic. So when we were like writing this all together, we would choose a topic each week to have our poems be written about, or to focus on. And part of the idea was just, you know, we all come from different places, and yeah, we have a lot of similarities, but to just showcase the different perspectives that we have. And so the week that we had on tongues, that's the chapter that Comb Through from Root to End is in, I really struggled coming up with like a poem, and so I just like sat with it for a long time. I often write in like the notes app on like my computer or like on my phone, and so like I would have the subject there on tongues, and just like a little bit every like couple days or week, I would just add a little bit to this poem, and it was a very different process to me because that wasn't how like I wrote like most of my other poems. And thanks for listening.
Hello. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out to listen to us read from our book. Before I start, I want to say about Aisha's poem, thank you for sharing those poems again. It's always wonderful to hear them. Heard them so many times at this point, but hearing them again gives me new appreciation every time. And I think Aisha really has a talent for incorporating an element of fun in her poems. We all like to say that there's like an element of like figuring out a puzzle. Every poem that she writes, there's always something to figure out, something to think more about, whether it's in like exploring different styles of poetry. And I think Ayesha is one of, among the six of us, she's the one who kind of explores among like a diverse range of poetry styles the most. And I really appreciate that. Thank you, Ayesha. So the first poem I'm going to be reading is on page 28 if you have the book, and it's called Why I Don't Celebrate Father's Day. On Father's Day, I made my dad a Father's Day card. He just looked at it and said, "Go give it to your mom." That's it, that's the poem. It's based on a true story. And it's in the chapter called On Mothers, and I remember when we were writing the different chapters, and that was the prompt of the week, I sat down and I tried to write a poem for my mom, and this is the only thing that came out. But I think in a way it is celebrating my mom, because growing up, anytime me and my siblings tried to express our gratitude or our love towards our dad, he would always redirect it towards my mom because of how much she sacrifices and does things for us. And so, yeah, the poem itself helps me remember that as well. The second poem I'm going to read is on page 115, and it's called Rice. I was taught this language by my father, who tended these fields as did his parents before him, taught that this backbreaking labor day after day is what feeds a newly born country through war and genocide that Pakistan wrought. Perfect long white grains fall into a bowl, glistening multitudes like the multiplication tables my mother made me memorize at 6, just like my parents did, as did their parents before them. Because with the grain that gave my ancestors sustenance through the famine that the British caused came the need for careful calculations of impartial portions, and so embedded within the genes they passed down to me is a binding obligation that I never fail the math test. Rice, painstakingly multiplied and cautiously divided, is what has kept us alive. So this poem is in the chapter on tongues, which I guess translates to like on languages. And when I was writing this poem, I thought about my mother tongue, which is Bengali, but I also thought about the history that's attached to it, the history of the liberation war that Bangladesh fought through, that a lot of my parents and their parents' generations were involved in. And at the same time, I also thought about the other things my parents had taught me apart from Bengali, the way they had taught me math, and just hearing stories about my dad working the fields and growing rice, and all that kind of came together into one poem. So the last poem I'm going to be reading is called Since the Day I Arrived, and it's on page 31. A sunny new day, a paint-splashed sky, a trunk packed full, a 4-year supply. A scarf just as blue covers my face as I cry. I've mourned the day I would leave since the day I arrived. A twin-stacked building, a bright green lawn, a never-ending hallway, a September song, a promise of growth in the 4 years to come. When the car pulls away, it leaves me somewhere I finally belong. So this poem I wrote about the very first day I moved into my college dorm as a freshman. And that first day of just moving to MIT and all the beginnings, things that were to come, and then just how emotional I was that day. and just like encapsulating that sense of belonging that I felt the 4 years that I was there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Maisha. As I'm sure you guys can all tell, Maisha writes in a way that's very concise, but her words are so picked in just such a precise and intelligent way that they make you feel exactly what she wants you to feel, and they make you see what she wants you to see. And it's a superpower that she has, and I just love her poems because of it. There are also 3 other poets who wrote this collection with us. As you've kind of gotten the gist of already, we met at college and started writing in dorm rooms, and this is kind of emerged after that, after we got kicked out for COVID, and this became something that we used to meet up every week on Zoom and write together. Unfortunately, now we're spread all over the country. Those 3 poets are in 3 different grad programs. But we wanted to share a little bit of their poetry with you guys because it is phenomenal. So I will start first, and I will read one of Aleena's poems. And this is on page 88 for those that are following. And it's called Love Will Keep Us Safe. Not so tangible, just a state of mind, a fireplace burning indoors, second place to a warm embrace of a loved one. When I leave, it's not the place I miss, but the little homes I've built in these bonds, the hugs, warmth, laughter we collected. Through the years, all these homes use so much space, but not on the ground. The timeshares in my head, completely owned by mortal angels. I have a hard time adjusting when I'm somewhere new. Settling down is infinitely scarier when you don't know what that looks like or who will welcome you. One thing about Aleena's poems, and if you have the book, you'll get to read all of the other ones, but she writes in a way that is so kind of brutally honest and literal. And because of it, I think when you read them, you get a really good insight into kind of who she is and how she thinks about the world. And I really like about this poem, and I relate to the fact of growing up in different places and getting to know people in all these different places and kind of wondering what the impact of that will be, and struggling to necessarily feel home. But at the same time recognizing that in each of these places you were able to find something, and there's a beauty in that. And I think because our whole book, some of the biggest themes about it center on being the children of immigrants or on migration, that a lot of our poems actually do end up touching on that, and it's interesting to see the different voices in which we all do that.
I'm going to be sharing a poem by Marwa Abdulhai. The poem that I'm going to share is on page 167. It's called In Remembrance of the One. In remembrance of the one. Half an hour before sunset, I rushed to make it just in time for prayer in the masjid. Quran in one hand and a pillow in the other, during rest and runs of worship. Long days of fasts and short nights of prayer didn't bother me, for prayer in the masjid was of a different kind in this blessed month. Nights pass as faces unknown become too familiar, the child who finds a chair for her mother, the mother who steps aside to cradle her crying child. In line for the same mercy, on the same journey, to create meaning from this void, I wonder why I was chosen to stand shoulder to shoulder with them in this very moment for prayer in the masjid. Was I a witness to the hopeful du'as, the patient du'as, the desperate du'as confessed on this night? Will these hands and feet and eyes be a witness to my good and bad? Some thoughts linger longer when I raise my hands for prayer in the masjid. The angel said Amin, and Allah listened as the cold morning came in. The world seemed just a little calmer as I left and waited once more for prayer in the masjid. Something that I love about Marwa's poems, which she would also say, is she says that her poems are a way to give dawah to herself and the world. And dawah basically means like spreading about Islam. And I really feel that in a lot of her poems, and especially this one, since she's talking a lot about prayer and being in the mosque, and specifically this poem is set during the month of Ramadan, where Muslims fast from dawn until dusk. And Ramadan just ended about like a month ago, so I'm still like feeling in the mood of this poem.
All right, so I'm going to read a poem by Afeefah, Khazi-Syed, and it's called Parachute. It's on page 19. It is the very first poem in the book. Parachute. Every time I settle at your feet with a bowl of coconut oil in hand, swirled and worn for exactly 15 seconds in the microwave, I feel generations. The hands of each and every one of them must have also moved like yours, working through knots of carelessness and exhaustion. The wrinkles on your fingers must have been passed down through hidden battles I will never know of. And this massage routine must have grown in perfection through centuries of ammis and nanis and dadis. When you neatly fold my hair into your signature braid, something tells me these words have been said before. When will you start taking care of yourself? I answer by asking you the same. Those last two lines get me every single time, and I think Afeefah did a great job of just encapsulating a poem that is very relatable, I think, for a lot of us with our own mothers. And I wish Afeefah were here to read it, because I don't think I did justice to the way she reads it. And it's just a beautiful poem. And also a huge shout out to Afeefah for the artwork in the book, because she did all of them. This is the one for the poem. It's the bottle of coconut parachute oil that a lot of South Asians are familiar with. Yeah, she's at school in Texas right now, so she couldn't join us. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing those lovely poems. We are going to open it up to audience questions. So if you have questions for our three poets, just raise your hand. I'll call on you. Yeah, go ahead.
Two questions actually.
Yeah.
How did you guys settle on the title? And the second question is, so realizing while reading it and hearing it at the same time, a lot of it also sounds like spoken word. So how was it in the process, how it sounds being said or read versus on the page?
So for folks who couldn't hear, the first question was about how did they come upon the title? And the second question was about how to translate the spoken word, sort of the art of spoken word, onto a page. Does that? Yeah.
I can answer the first question. We've kind of talked a bit about how we started writing together in like dorm rooms for the book. And so it started on like one night after an event. A few of us were in one of our friends' dorm rooms, and everyone who was there happened to like love poetry. And we realized this, and we started saying, oh, like, should we start like some sort of poetry circle and start like meeting regularly to write together? And in that process, we were like, oh, let's choose a topic each week and stuff like that. And then like we just like kept going, like jumping off of each other's ideas. And then one of our friends who was there, Hannah Herzai, she actually just came up with the title. She was like, oh, our ancestors did not breathe this air. And then as time went on, our group like expanded and to like because there were only a few of us there that night, to like more of our friends. And so she's no longer like a part of the group, but she was the one who came up with the title. And it was literally just like that, like out of like thin air.
Okay. I remember when Hannah said the title, like we were all just in love with it. We were like, this is it. And we did briefly consider some other alternatives, but we were like, no, nothing's gonna be this one. To answer the second question, I think our journey with translating written poems to like spoken poems is a bit different for everyone. I'll speak about my experience. I remember I was taking a poetry class at my team. A lot of us have taken the same poetry class, and my professor said a lot of poets, they just write poems that are meant to be read, and other poets will write poems that are meant to be spoken out loud. And I think I started off with the poems that were just written, and I focused a lot on that element. But then after publishing the book and just like going through like a lot of these readings and presenting it to audiences, I think it forced me to pay more attention to like how I was reading things. And I guess like this also goes back to when we were in the poetry circles together, because we'd come to these Zoom calls or to these meetings in our dorm rooms, and we'd read our poems to each other. And we'd give each other feedback, and I think that practice of reading them out loud and then figuring out how we want the words to sound, how we want things to have impact, and that also going back to how we edit them, right? And rearrange things just so it has the impact that we want.
Yeah, I'll just add, the way that we did edits was basically internally for a very long time, and because of that we were able, I think, to just practice saying things to each other and then being like, well, what if you said it this way? And maybe that is kind of why some of them do have a more of like a spoken word energy about them, but we were really grateful and lucky to get an editor towards the end of the process, but most of the big changes that we made to each other's poems were actually internally, and that also was an interesting process because we were all friends to get comfortable enough telling each other when we thought something could benefit from a change. But I think we really just knew that we all kind of trusted each other and wanted to respect each other's styles and voices, and so in a way being friends actually made that I think a good process, and none of us feel like our poems were changed.
Wonderful. Do we have any other audience questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Oh yeah, in the back, go ahead.
Hi, amazing work. That was really wonderful. I guess I'm curious because you guys all like came together because you like loved poetry. So did you guys have like favorite poets, and like can you maybe touch on like what brought you comfort or what made you love poetry in the first place? And, yeah.
Sure, I'll take the first stab. I think that we actually shared a lot of influences in poetry. Some of my favorite poets are Ocean Vuong and Safiel Hilo. And in general, I think I just gravitate more towards poets who also come from different backgrounds and talk about that in their poetry. And then in terms of like what drew me to poetry in general, I think I've always really liked writing, but going into STEM, and now I'm studying medicine, it's really, really hard to write for long periods of time. It's really, really hard to get that in my schedule. But with poetry, what's really great about it is that sometimes, like Ayesha said, you can just throw something into a notes app and then touch upon that feeling later and build upon that feeling later. And it is kind of self-contained in that way, that it's, you know, one thing and then you can easily jump to another feeling, and you don't have to really commit to something. But it's beautiful in the sense that with just a few words, you can really make someone feel something. And really, really talented poets can do that even better, but it's like, it's pretty special, I think, and that's kind of what drew me towards it, is kind of just the way that I saw people reacting to poetry, and thinking that it's a wonderful thing that we have the ability to use words to do that, and that kind of is what drew me towards it.
So growing up, I loved reading poetry in school because I think poetry geared towards children is a lot of fun, especially like work by Shel Silverstein and a lot of these children's poets. I always loved it if a poem could make me laugh, and I think those are the poems I remembered. Like even growing up reading other works like Shakespeare or like the other like classic poets, like I never like really felt anything strongly, but I loved how like a funny poem could make me like crack up and like just brighten my day. And I think that's like the approach I brought in while I was writing poems. Like I want to make someone laugh, or I want someone to feel something intense that they can resonate with. And I think that especially started changing later on when I started like listening to spoken word poets on like YouTube, and a lot of these upcoming poets are like talking about race and about being children of immigrants and just dealing with all these different struggles, and they were very, very relatable, and you could feel it like deep inside your heart as they spoke these words. Yeah.
I feel like my answer is a combination of Maisha's and Mariam's answer. I similarly, like growing up, I always loved poetry, and also Shel Silverstein. I think he was probably one of the first like poetry books that I got. And I think what always drew me to it was the fact that like it can have a rhythm to it, or it can have like a rhyme. I love alliteration. That was another reason I wanted to share Marwa's in remembrance of the one that repeats for prayer in the masjid multiple times. And I forgot my train of thought. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. And then the other reason I really like it is because it doesn't need like it can have those things. It can have repetition, alliteration, and stuff like that. But it also can just have no structure at all. And I think that I really enjoy like pushing those bounds with my poetry. And so a contemporary poet who I really like, her name is Thria Al-Montaser. She's Yemeni American, and I feel like she similarly like pushes against like having to be written a certain way.
Beautiful. Oh yeah, go ahead.
How about a small question? One of your poems shared writing with like non-case, but you only write on the real life for any reason.
Yeah, so that's in the When I Think Sunshine poem. I think it was just like to emphasize how at the end of summer, because I don't know, you're just like, you're a child and you're just feeling that joy and like just running around. Like you wake up at 10 a.m. and are like, oh, are my friends awake so I can like go play outside with them some more. And then like school starts. And it's like, all of a sudden it's like real life. It's not just, summer. It was just, I think, to emphasize that.
Another question. There are some poems that have like a song to it. You will like sing them when you get together, or
Samantha's adding me again. In my On Mother's poem, which is called, what is it called? Dear My Favorite Memory. On the right side is a lullaby called Los Pojitos Dicen. It's actually originally a nursery rhyme by Ismael Paragues, who's a Chilean poet. And since I can remember, that was like one of the lullabies that my mom would sing to me growing up. And so when I first read it, actually I don't think I sang it to them when we were workshopping it. I think we had a poetry. Oh yeah. Okay. And part of the process is like we were putting together the book. We decided to do something called focus groups. And so we would invite like friends, like give input on like certain chapters, just to like see what they think and like can we edit it some more. And so I think it was during that focus group that I like sang it for the first time, and they were actually surprised. Whoever was in the Zoom room with me like didn't expect that.
All right, and did I see yes? Go right ahead.
Were there ever any poems that you wrote that you didn't like
other authors were like, wait, this is really good?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all had moments of that, but I definitely had more than my fair share. And also there were a lot of poems, and I don't know, maybe some of them we didn't read today, the ones that I'm thinking of, but some of them deal with topics that I think were, you know, in media, for example, people have a lot of different narratives of what Muslims are like, or even just even just women, or some of our identities and our backgrounds and the countries that we've come from and how safe they are and everything like that. And so we wanted to be really careful with how we were talking about certain topics. We wanted to be true to ourselves and our experiences and our feelings, but also recognize that people out there can kind of twist things or come into and read something with their own preconceived notions. And yeah, so there was a lot of times where I think we just like wanted to, for the focus groups too, just make sure that what we were saying, what people were understanding from what we were saying was more along the lines of what we intended, and that you can't control anything. That's the beauty of art, but there were some poems where we had to at least like internally get some more encouragement and feedback on. And I think there are no poems in this book, or none of my poems would be at the stage that they're at if we didn't go through this process. And because of it, I'm very proud of what is in this book.
Do you guys want to add anything?
I think Mariam, you stated it very well.
All right, we have time for a few more questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So you're all extraordinarily accomplished women in STEM, and that's obviously a huge part of what you give your time to. And a lot of people do like poetry groups or writing groups, but it won't manifest more than like, sort of informative therapy. Is there a way in which cementing this into a published work that changed how you thought about your identity overall as like added a poet to all of the things that you already are? And if not, what part do you feel like having this published work, which really is an accomplishment and a different kind of milestone than just writing for fun, what piece does that hold in your lives?
I can answer that. So I think it feels very cool to be able to say I'm a poet and I've published. And I think that's true for all of us. Personally, like growing up, I would write, but I was always encouraged to pay more attention to school and like the more STEM side of things. And I think especially starting college, I kind of stopped doing all my other hobbies because I was just so wrapped up in schoolwork. And this was really quite a form of therapy, especially when the pandemic started. We continued to meet over Zoom because this was like one constant that we had every week, 1 hour. We'd come together, write about our feelings, share our feelings, and that was very therapeutic in many ways. And then after we published the book, I remember like it just felt so unreal to hold it. To have graduated college and to have published a book, which I had never imagined. I mean, I had always dreamed of like being a writer, of publishing, but it actually came true. And I was talking to one of my poetry professors at MIT, and I remember I told her like, I never imagined this, and she said something that I will never forget, and she basically said, you are a better artist because of your science, and you're a better scientist because of your art. And that was very powerful to hear.
That was really well said. I'll just add a little bit that I think some of the confidence, for me at least, has only come after publishing. I remember even when we were sending the manuscript out to get the blurbs on the back, so from other people, that we really respected, and it was a little bit intimidating, but then getting that feedback was really validating, and having to print another round because the first round sold out. Like all of these little things I think have really given us signs, I think for some of us that are a little less naturally confident, that we've put together a piece that I think is resonating with people. And I know at least for me, this 2 months ago, I was in Pakistan with some of my cousins, and I was able to give some of the copies of the book to them. And it wasn't until like seeing them react to it and seeing, and they're like all younger girls, and I had like a very, very emotional reaction to seeing how they kind of took in the book, that I realized I had done something that, you know, had kind of achieved what I originally wanted to set out to do, and that to me was the most important part.
Beautiful. We have time for one more question if anyone has one. But otherwise, let's give one more round of applause to our three incredible poets.